Hey, this is Phe from WinuSoft. In this video I'm going to show you how to use Oxygen interactions to create a pop-up. The example I have is on my site here, so if you click the mobile menu icon, this nice pop-up appears which contains our mobile menu, and then it can either be closed by the close button in the top right or by clicking the backdrop. So I've got a test site over here, and let's get started. The first thing we need to do is to create the overlay that shows behind the pop-up. So if you add a new container, and then I tend to move it to the top of the structure panel, then we're going to call this page blur overlay. And then we will also give it the class page blur overlay. So the next thing we need to do is to set the size to 100% width and the height to 100 VH. And then we need to set the position to fixed and the Z index to 9999. I want to set the background to a dark colour but semi-transparent, so I'm just going to pick something down here and then set it to be semi-transparent. And then the final thing is under effects, you want to set a backdrop filter, and we need to set a blur of somewhere around 8 pixels. On the other site I'm using 16 pixels, but I feel like 8 will also work and it will show a bit more of what's going on behind everything. So for now we can leave that visible so that we can see what the overall effect will be, but at the end we need to come in here and set the display to none. So the next thing to do is to create the pop-up itself. So if we come in here, I'm just going to rename this to Pop-up Outer, and then again give it a class with the same name. So I'm going to set the max width, I'm going to set the width to 95%, but then the max width to 400 pixels. I'm going to leave the height set to default, but then the max height set to 90 VH. And then I'm going to set the overflow to auto, so if the content doesn't fit inside it, then it will automatically scroll when needed. I'm then going to set the position to fixed. The Z index I'm going to set to 10,000. So it's one higher than the page blur overlay, which means it will always sit on top of it. And I'm going to set the top to 50% and the left to 50%. And then we're going to come in here and we're going to add the class name, which is Popup Outer. And then we are going to do transform, translate, -50%, comma, -50%. And then this will just absolutely centre the item in the screen. I'm then going to add another element inside this, and I'm going to call this Pop-up Inner. And again, I'm going to add a class with the same name. If you're only adding one class to each of these elements, you don't necessarily need to rename them in the structure panel because they will show the first class name. But if you're likely to add multiple class names and you're not sure on what order things are going to go in, then it's probably easier to rename these so that you know what everything does. Anyway, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a border radius of 25 pixels. Then I'm going to set the border width to 2, the colour to white, and the style to solid. And then I'm going to give this some padding of probably 2 rem on each side. So these are variables that I set up earlier, and it just enables me to keep everything looking the same and consistent. Oh, come on, there we go. So then I'm going to add a heading to this. I'm going to make an H5, lovely. We'll just say this is your pop-up. And I'm going to give that a margin bottom, which I've set up some margin classes. So margin bottom of 2 rem. And then just a text element that says enter your pop-up text here. Obviously you can put anything inside this that you like. So you can add buttons, you can add text, you can add images. In the case of the site over here, I've got a full mobile menu going on in here. And all of this is powered by interactions, and then classes are added and removed so that things can be shown and hidden. So the next thing I'm going to do is the pop-up inner. I'm going to set the position on this to relative, and I'm just going to add an icon which we will call close pop-up. and I'm going to set the position on this to absolute, and then I'm going to set the top to maybe 24 pixels and the right to 24 pixels. And in effects, I'm going to set the cursor to a pointer. And then we will come in here and we'll choose a cross icon. And then we'll use that eventually to close the pop-up as well. So the next thing we need to do is we need to set the page blur overlay display to none, because that's in the way, and we need to do the same for pop-up outer. We just need to set the display to none. So now we can come in and click on this button here. I had previously set up a link. I have removed that, lovely. And then we need to come in here to interactions. So we're going to add an interaction, and the trigger is when we click this element, we want an action to happen, and the action is that we want to show an element, and we need to find it via the CSS selector. And in this case, the first thing is page blur overlay. And then if we duplicate this click, the other thing we want to happen is when you click this element, we want to show the element pop-up outer. So I'm just going to go to the front end and we're going to see if that's working. So we click this, then we get a blur in the background and we get a pop-up showing as well. I think I'm just going to set a background colour on the pop-up so that you can't see the page behind it. So on pop-up inner, I'm going to set the background colour to a black or an off black. I'm going to set it to the background colour. If I come back into here, I'm actually going to delete this second click, and then I'm going to open the first one and I'm going to duplicate the action in here. So we can also show another item in here, which is pop-up outer. So I'm just going to save and double check that that's working. I haven't got any typos. Lovely. So the next thing we need to do is we need to make it so that this close button does something or clicking on the backdrop does something. So interactions are really easy to copy in Oxygen 6. So if we just right click here and go into copy interactions, and then page blur overlay, we need to paste the interactions. And if you click on them, we need to make a slight change. So when you click this element, we want to hide element page blur overlay and hide element pop-up outer. And then if we copy these again, we need to come in here to this close icon and we need to paste the interactions in here. So if you click on this element, which is the cross, then we will hide element page blur overlay and we will hide element pop-up outer. That should be everything we need. If I come in here and save that, and then we'll refresh on the front end. So that opens it. If we click here, we close. Open again, click the backdrop, it closes. So hopefully that's helpful. Once again, this is Phe from WinuSoft. Thanks for watching. Bye.